Hi everyone, RFG here with a review for the remake of Silent Hill 2, developed by Bloober Team and published by Konami, released on PC and PS5. This survival horror remake overhauls the original Silent Hill 2 with many modernized aspects instead of focusing just mostly on improved graphics. For those who haven't really played previous Silent Hill titles, Silent Hill 2 was pretty much a standalone game of the series. It shares themes and concepts with the others, but its story was, and for the most part still is, self-contained. While the original Silent Hill 2 was mostly played in fixed camera and behind the back angles that track the main character, the remake mostly sticks to a third person over the shoulder angle with a controllable camera. This affects the way the game plays in various ways, and I'll get to that soon. The story begins with main character James Sunderland on the outskirts of Silent Hill. Beckoned by his dead wife to seek her out in their special place, James feels compelled to find answers and begins his journey. During his time here, James will encounter mysterious characters, creepy enemies, and elaborate puzzles in the eerie and ominously foggy town of Silent Hill. There's not much to do when you first gain control of James. You can get used to his movement and control of the camera, but grabbing the nearby map from his car is of utmost importance. Throughout the game, James will constantly update the maps he collects. He'll mark locked doors, ones that are blocked, one-way access passages, and if there's something distinguishing nearby, amongst other notable markings. You can quick access your map or go through the menu, but no matter which way you open it, James will look at it in real time, leaving you vulnerable, or lets you review what's around while something else is going on. The path from James's car is pretty straightforward, but along the way you'll come across a save point. These aren't safe areas and there's no limit or items needed to use them. After this point, you'll be gradually introduced to other gameplay mechanics. Doors and gates usually don't require a prompt to open, and picking up new items or memos, which often contain clues, lets you examine them. James can interact with the environment in numerous ways depending on the situation. When near something with white cloth, he'll be able to hurdle over waist-high obstacles, crawl through certain spaces, or pass through narrow spaces. Later on, James will be able to open drawers, cabinets, or climb onto specific objects. These interactions can be specific, so if you're ever stuck, keep an eye out for something around the environment, or even James himself, as he'll also react to interests nearby. Eventually, you'll come across the radio. The radio will occasionally have purpose story-wise, but its main use is to warn you when enemies are nearby. This is also when you encounter your first enemy and grab your first melee weapon. Your melee weapon is tied directly to your attack button. When James is near an enemy, he'll essentially auto-target the nearest one at the press of the button. James can also perform a quick dodge. This dodge covers a decent amount of space and gives you a bit of invulnerability, but I'll get more into that later. When an enemy is down, James can initiate a ground attack or a stomp depending on the distance of the enemy. After defeating the enemy, and now that you have a weapon, you'll be able to properly explore Silent Hill. Having a weapon is important as you'll start to get more of an idea on how progression works while exploring the town. Enemies are scattered here and there, and a lot of times you'll have to break windows or parts of a wall in order to access someplace new. Just about anything that looks like it's made of glass can be broken, so feel free to go smashy when you feel it's necessary. Sometimes it'll lead to entrances to a location or maybe an item. But while exploring, you'll mostly be on the lookout for clues, access to a key area, key items, or solving puzzles along the way. If you're uncertain of what's a key item or just what's in your inventory, you can open up the menu at any time. Your inventory isn't limited in any way as far as I can tell. While it is separated into categories, you won't always need to directly access it except for certain situations. The key item section of the inventory is probably the most necessary to visit. It's absolutely needed for certain items to be combined to be used for puzzles, and sometimes you may need the description as not all important information is recorded in a map, but you don't need to be in the menu to use them. The medical section serves the purpose of reviewing how many healing items you have more than actually using them. Like the map, using one puts the game back into real time, but you already have access to heals by pressing a button to use a medium heal or holding the button down for a large one. Collecting medical items after your first one also brings up a quick, largely unobtrusive notification that shows how many of each type of heal is currently in your inventory. The same if you attempt to use a heal when your health is full. James's health is represented by the border of the screen, the menu background color, and his coat. The redder the edge of the screen, the menu background, and the more blood on his coat shows how low his health is. The personal section stores items that connect to certain characters, including James himself. Memos you find are stored separately, and while many contain clues, those clues are also often recorded by James in a map, but these sections of the menu still have some merit to visit them. I couldn't find much reason to check the equipment screen, and I only did mostly due to curiosity. Part of the reason for this is how weapons are handled. As soon as you obtain a ranged weapon, it's assigned to its own binding. This means that you always have a ranged weapon equipped, and using a different binding instantly switches your equipped ranged weapon. Holding the ranged aim button allows you to start aiming your firearm, and pressing the attack button allows you to shoot your weapon. Whether you want to use a melee attack or shoot your ranged weapon depends on whether the ranged aim button is being held. Holding the ranged aim button also shows your ammo loaded and total ammo. Using weapons to defend yourself is a given in the survival horror genre. James isn't all that nimble in terms of movement around an enemy, but his quick dodge provides the necessities to avoid taking damage. His responses while in combat are fairly quick, and he uses items just as fast, but he's not an expert combatant, so while James can fire a shot and reload at a decent speed, his aim can be tough to pin properly. Enemies also share James's clumsiness and movement, but are also equally competent in being aggressive and initiating attacks. Some enemies can also evade attacks, so these confrontations, while somewhat awkward, have a sort of back and forth balance. Bosses continue this trend, however most tend to have harder hitting attacks, so these encounters do feel more intense and add to the atmosphere. I bring up atmosphere because these boss battles are often taking place in the other Silent Hill. This other version of the town will usually manifest as a harsher, rusted, and industrialized version of areas to visit throughout the game. This other Silent Hill is linked to indoor areas you'll visit, and isn't all that easy to get to. Not only are there plenty of enemies you'll come across, but plenty of locked doors, blocked paths, and puzzles that will impede your progress. If a puzzle is stopping you from moving forward, it can be a logic type that has clues nearby to help you figure out the solution, or other types that might have you collect multiple key items to find and then interact with an object to begin the puzzle. One thing about these puzzles or progression areas, it's really well handled on how it may take a while to reach a key item, but checking the map makes you realize you're not too far from where you need to get to next, or in a centralized area. Clearing these sections usually leads you into the other world of the area you're in. Traversing through these otherworld sections generally consists of you going through a separate set of tougher enemies and more puzzles. These otherworld sections aren't just a retread of the area you're in. Besides the more intimidating vibe, different areas may be open and new paths will need to be found to progress before getting to the boss or exiting the area. Each time you exit the otherworld marks a large step in progress in Silent Hill 2. This remake allows for plenty of exploration, but it does still follow a linear structure, and you do feel like you're moving further ahead when entering and exiting the other world. It's important to note the change in the environment visually for how much of a visual improvement it is over the original. The original game depended on fog not just to convey the murky and mysterious feeling from a story perspective, but was also needed from a technical standpoint. So it is impressive that this remake is able to retain that feeling, even though it doesn't have the graphical limitation. It's equally impressive to see the overall improvements in the otherworld and character models. You can now see texture on clothes and effects on enemies, while the otherworld backgrounds show off details of the industrial rust that permeates it. Sound design matches the mood as necessary. The eerie silence on the streets, the intense moments from facing a boss, or the crunch of bashing an enemy with a steel pipe, all fit appropriately. Music does a great job of matching the mood when it is present. Difficulty is fair, and even if you're not playing super careful, ammo and both types of health refills are pretty abundant as long as you're doing a decent job of conserving both. At the end of each of my 2 playthroughs, I had plenty of reserved ammo and health refills. I played on standard difficulty for combat and puzzles, but you can also choose between 3 levels of difficulty for each. And for those looking for replay value, there are multiple endings for you to discover, and many of these require you to explore around to find something that can lead to those other endings. It's not all perfect in Silent Hill 2 though. I did have frequent low frame rate drops, and there are times when it does feel jarring when it drops to 30 frames per second for cutscenes. Melee weapon control can also be a bit wonky on occasion. It works fine when one enemy or target is on screen, but when there are 2 targets next to each other, sometimes it feels like you're trying to force the right target. There are some other slight issues, but I feel like these are some of the more notable ones. Other than that, I highly recommend the Silent Hill 2 remake for all fans of the survival horror genre. The puzzles are clever, and often reward exploration and logic. Combat isn't over-empowering, and the tension and feeling of isolation are both there. There is also a lot of accessibility options and visual options to choose from. And again, if the 2 gives you hesitation, remember that the story is pretty much complete on its own. For fans of the original, I fear there's enough that's new here to give it a shot. The gameplay is expanded in several ways, with puzzles getting overhauled including how they work and the layouts of most locations. There are also new endings added, and plenty of homages to the original. Most importantly, I think it's a good representation of how the series can proceed in the future. But that's it for me. Let me know what you think below. Thanks. Bye.